welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. Zonan Canada is a podcast focusing on the connections between anime and Canadian media. And in this episode, we're welcoming back onto the show a guest who was last on a couple years ago, a Canadian who has a very, I think, little over 20-year history working in the music side of anime. I think that's correct, Raj?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
so it's Raj Ramayya. Again, very long history working in the music side of both anime and Japanese media in general. He's probably best known as vocalist for Cowboy Bebop, Wolf's Rain, more recently Made in Abyss, frequent collaborator with Yoko, Kanno, and Kevin Penkin. And Raj, what else have you done recently?
I did about 7 or 8 tracks for Tower of God, the new Crunchyroll release that's doing pretty well right now with Kevin. Yeah, so we did Tower of God, and we've worked on a few games recently. We've got like 3 or 4 different games out from some Chinese game companies, and I just finished working with Octopath Traveler. You guys familiar with that game?
Yeah. There's a sequel that's coming out, I believe. Right.
So I was involved with one of the tracks for the sequel for that, and then I'm on a couple of other games. I'm not sure if I can say anything. It's some fairly big game companies. So
okay. Well, if you're not sure if you'd say anything, probably best not to. I don't want to have to pull this whole episode. That's not fun. Raj, thanks so much for coming back on the show. It's always a pleasure having you on. So last time you were on the show was back, fall of 2018. And we live in a very different world now. What's been up with you in that time, in addition to the stuff you've mentioned?
We did a very special performance of Cowboy Bebop's The Real Folk Blues, and it was a tribute track featuring Yoko Kanno, and also several voice actors, Steve Blum, and Bo Billingsley, just a ton of people from the original Cowboy Bebop cast and crew and musicians, and also a bunch of other people that are just fans who are also composers, singers, musicians. It's called Anime Gives Back. And Funimation put it out for us. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. And Sunrise Publishing in Japan helped promote it, and they authorized us to use it. And we worked with my good friend Mason Lieberman, who was one of the audio directors at Tencent Games in LA.
Yeah, and this is one of a few things like that that's come out from Yoko Kanno and her collaborators recently. Because, of course, we are in COVID-19 world right now, and to varying degrees still logged up and trying to avoid going outside. I think the first one of those that dropped, or the first little project that came out with that Yoko Kanno was spearheading, was I think that she had various artists get together to do a in quarantine performance of Lion from Macross Frontier, and I can't keep track of all the different ones that have come out, but there's been that one. And then the Real Folk Blues one was probably the biggest, the biggest one, needless to say. So, can you say more about how that came together, or kind of what your role was, or what was going on behind the scenes with that?
I kind of came into it a little bit late in the game. Mason Lieberman he's worked on Beyblade Burst and a whole bunch of Pokemon stuff. And so he came by my studio in California during GDC a couple of years ago with Kevin Penkin and a bunch of other people. And we had a big jam session. We had tons of fun. We all kept in touch. And then during the COVID-19 shelter in place, which is called in California, we're all just shelter in place. So he was like, okay, we got to do something. And then he started talking to different people. And he put together a group of musicians, singers, and performers, and a Japanese engineer to pull us together. And then he contacted me. He said, "Do you want to be a part of it?" And I was like, "Sounds great." And I'm at the studio every day, all day, and nowhere to go. So it sounded like a great project to get involved with. And it just started growing and growing, and more people wanted to be part of it. So I said, "Listen, I'll just sing on it." I was actually on that tour. That Real Folk Blues tour back in the late 90s with Yoko. That was the first tour I went on with her. And Mai Yamane, she sang that song. So I was there on that tour. So I sent him some pictures of me and Mai and everybody on stage. He was like, this is so cool, and let's do it for sure. And then we did the track, and it turned out fantastic. And Mason really pulled it together with the video, which you can see on YouTube. And then I contacted my buddy Steve Bloom, which most people know from Cowboy Bebop, Spike, and just tons of shows. And he wanted to be part of it too. And it was like we had too many people suddenly. Like everybody wanted to get involved and do something for the first responders, and it was a great project. And then I was shocked because we had to get approval from Sunrise, and Yoko Kanno says, I want to be involved. So I was like, wow, like it just kept getting better and better. And it was like, I don't remember these other people, but there was like a whole bunch of other big stars who wanted to be involved. And it was crazy. It was impressive that the Cowboy Bebop stuff was still that popular. And yeah, it just kind of took off from there, and it came out, and all the proceeds, Funimation actually supported us on this and promoted it, and yeah, it's out there. And for all the people that view it, I mean, any of the proceeds go to first responders to support them for the COVID-19 situation, and I'm very proud of it. I think it was a great project, and we're going to do more. That's what I've been up to. That has been a big release, and of course, Tower of God on Crunchyroll. That's been a big thing. It's been taking off. It's been doing really, really well, and we are very proud of that. And then Kevin Penkin and I are talking about some other potential future projects. And that's kind of where we are. I just actually finished a Canadian project called Shadows of Dumont. I don't know if you know the famous kind of Canadian rebel hero named Gabriel Dumont. So he's kind of a part of Canadian folklore, and it's kind of an animated documentary drama that I scored and wrote some theme songs for. And that's a really cool project that just came out. It's just going to come out on TV in Canada. So I'm proud of that as well. So if anybody gets a chance to check out the Shadows of Dumont, it's called.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think
it's was that produced in Saskatchewan?
It was produced in Saskatchewan, and my brother was one of the producers actually, and but it was like we did a joint production that people coming out of California. We worked on it as well. It's got some great music in it actually, because it's semi-animated. It's a documentary drama, but it's like a descendant of Gabriel Dumont, and talks about Gabriel Dumont and his influence on people. He was a real interesting character in Canadian history and mythology. And he was this incredible figure, a rebel, kind of like a Buffalo Bill rebel, a Jesse James rebel of the Canadian late 1800s. And so this animated live action road show is actually really cool. We're just wrapping up the trailer, so it hasn't actually come out officially yet. We'll have the trailer done in the next few days, the music for that, and then it's going to come out, and I'll be sure to send you over a press release. Hopefully you can tell people to go check it out. I think if you're Canadian, it'll be an interesting watch.
Yeah. Sure. Honestly, Gabriel Dumont, as I mentioned, doesn't ring a bell to me. He's for my quick research, he's a Métis. He was a Métis leader, from what I understand. Yeah. Yeah,
Louis Riel, Gabriel Dumont. Yeah. I mean, I think it might be more of maybe a Western, like the Prairie Province thing. I think because he's really well known. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm over in Vancouver, so I may be too far west, but but it sounds interesting for sure.
Yeah, definitely interesting stuff, and that's kind of what I've been working on for the time being, and kind of taking a little time off for a while.
Yeah, and I understand you're in Saskatchewan right now.
I am. I come back every summer to Saskatchewan. I love it here. It's amazing how many people in the industry have come from Saskatchewan. I'm always surprised. I mean, there was one. I think, what was the name? There's an anime that came out. I was quite surprised. Caroline
Tuesday.
Yeah, Caroline Tuesday. And it turns out the composer is from Saskatoon too, right?
I heard something about that.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear that, because I know when you worked with Yoko Kanno and them on Cowboy Bebop back in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
With Cowboy Bebop, it was anime was a very different industry back
Right.
then. And, Yoko Kanno was basically collecting
Mm-hmm.
various musical artists who were living in Japan for whatever
Right.
reason, who spoke various languages and could contribute to this kind of cosmopolitan soundtrack that she was putting together.
Right.
Whereas she wasn't involved in Carol and Tuesday, it's of course the latest anime from Shinichiro Watanabe, who also did Cowboy Bebop. But for that particular project, they were gathering artists and contributors and animators from all over the world. It was it wasn't a matter of finding people who were in Japan. It was reaching out and bringing people around the world together to this production. And it was a large part of it was probably because it was done for Fuji TV's Plus Ultra Block and has the ties to Netflix and was distributed to Netflix internationally. And I'm sure that all played into the resources that Watanabe and Studio Bones had when they were doing it. But when you look at the approach to making that kind of internationalism in Cowboy Bebop 20 years ago versus Carol and Tuesday today, it's kind of a stunning contrast, and it's interesting that one of the of course his name escapes me as well, but one of the main contributors that would also be from Saskatchewan. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I know, and it's really interesting because they're not just one. There's probably, I can't remember everybody, but there's one of the biggest non-Japanese bands in Japan was two Canadian guys from Saskatchewan named Monkey Magic.
Yeah.
And so that's another crazy. It's just very interesting. At the time when I lived in Japan, moved to Japan, I lived there for half my life, but when I lived there in the 90s, it was just, there weren't a lot of foreigners around. It was unusual. We knew each other. And so it's interesting to see how many people sort of, got involved in the music scene and made a splash coming from Canada. There's quite a few of them actually. So that's a good thing. I'm very pro-Canadian. So it's like, I want to support other Canadian artists, and it's interesting to see how many people have gone to Canada, Canadian musicians, and actually made an impact. It's good. It's very good. And, I don't know what things are like now. I haven't actually lived there for a few years now. But when I go back, it's a very different scene. It's not quite as international. It's strange, but it was more international back in the 90s than it is now.
I can't speak for, all of the Japanese industry, of course, but it goes back to that contrast with Cowboy Bebop. You had, they could search locally and create kind of this international character, and now they can reach out, even though I guess just the way the world has changed has just made it a different scene for international artists in Japan. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, they've, anime, from what I can gather, because I have a few soundtracks slated for 2021 and 2021, sorry, and so I am as talking to some of the agencies and some of the animation companies over the studios, and they're telling me that they actually want a more international flavor. And they have their Japanese composers and artists, but they do want things to become a little bit more international to some degree. So that's why I think now more than ever, anime is, for the Japanese industry, they're thinking, hey, anime is global. And so they are looking at getting more global-minded artists involved, maybe musicians and composers and singers and stuff like that. So that's actually a really good thing. When we started, it was like, Yoko Kanno and people would just go out and scout. People literally come out to a bar or a cafe, and literally they'd show up like out of a movie and just say, hey, we can give you their card, and hey, give me a call. We'd love to work with you.
Yeah, there's a few stories about that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just really, it was just bizarre. It really happened like that. And then nowadays it's more like, they can reach out via email, right? Via your website and contact people all over the world. And I think that, that's fantastic. And so you're seeing, I'm seeing more and more international flavor in anime. It's not just Japanese people involved, but there's so many different, nationalities involved with it. And, it's really cool. Actually, Steve Conti, if you remember Steve, one of the singer-songwriters, He's actually going to be doing a workshop. We're doing a workshop series with several voice actors and composers and songwriters from different anime and games, like especially anime. Kevin Penkin is going to do a workshop with us. And Steve Conte is going to do a workshop, and they're going to talk about the process of making music for anime. So
this is an online kind of thing.
It's an online. Yeah, it's an online workshop. I'll send you the information. Please share it with everybody. We'd love people to get involved with it. It's going to be limited seating. I think we're only limiting it to 15 students only, and people that are really who want to get into writing songs or singing or composing instrumental music for anime. This is your chance to get the behind the scenes information and hear it from people who are doing it. And we're going to be having these workshops fairly regularly. We're just featuring Steve Conte and Kevin Penkin at first, and then we're going to be adding in more people later on. But we want to give people a chance to check it out. I mean, if you're interested in music for anime, man, I can't think of anything better than hearing what they have to say and having them show you the process of what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Penkin especially he's definitely one of the biggest names, or at least one of the biggest names being pushed right now in association with not only anime music, but the international transformation of how, different creative parts of anime are created. And, the big, as you've mentioned, the big project that you collaborated with him on recently was Tower of God. And Tower of God is based off of a Korean webcomic. The animation production, I don't think it's actually a Korean co-production. I think it is, it's completely made within that anime production pipeline in Japan. But it's based off of Korean source material. But of course you have, it's based on Korean source material, has an Australian composer. So it's really being pushed as kind of an international kind of production. So I had two questions. One, what exactly were your contributions to the soundtrack on Tower of God? And also, what is your take on kind of this show as an international sort of entity?
Well, I mean, as far as the contribution, I co-wrote, I think, 8 tracks together with Kevin for the out of the 30 tracks. So about a quarter of the tracks, 25% of the tracks I co-wrote with Kevin. And then I sang and played guitar on some of the other tracks. And so that was my musical contribution. Kevin actually came to my studio in San Francisco Bay Area, and we worked on this soundtrack over a couple of weeks, and we got to know each other actually really well and became really good friends after that. And so that was our working experience together. It was almost like a camp. We were just kind of isolated in the studio and working on making music. What my thoughts on it are that it's amazing because he's actually gotten other people to collaborate on the other track. So this has been Kevin has been the main guy, but he's invited other people like me to join him, and he's doing the Yoko Kanno thing, right? He's kind of being international and bringing other interesting musicians aboard to make something that's more interesting, right? Giving it an international flavor with people from all over the world contributing to the soundtrack. So, and I think that's kind of what I'm seeing as a trend right now, right? With anime soundtracks, that you see people like Kevin and what's his name, Porter Robinson as well, doing things like the
he was Crunchyroll produced a music video for one of his tracks that was really great. I'm not sure if he's had other contributions beyond that, but Crunchyroll as a getting more involved with the production committees of anime in Japan, and even greenlighting projects like the Porter Robinson music video. It definitely shows that those streaming companies are playing a large role, because anime is kind of walking in two lanes right now. On one hand, it's still something very much focused on the domestic audience in Japan and playing at 2:00 in the morning and thriving off of Blu-ray sales that are, really just specifically focused on a small audience that follows it loyally. But then it's this huge entity internationally on streaming services. that's kind of in an entirely different context. So it's it's really interesting to see how different companies are straddling that line, and the role that organizations like Crunchyroll are playing in that, and kind of pushing it in the other direction as this global streaming phenomenon.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the world's changing every day now, right?
So you travel a lot, and of course, I understand right now you're actually in 14-day quarantine due to COVID-19.
Yeah.
So as someone who I know you mentioned it's been quite a while since you've been in Japan. How long? I guess you're pretty much usually based out of San Francisco these days.
Yeah. I mean, I live the majority of the time in San Francisco Bay Area, in the North Bay Area. My studio and home are over by Skywalker Sound in that area. So I'm there most of the time, and it's just it's a great place. It's like a resort kind of area, close to wine country and everything. So we have a lot of musicians coming up from LA and artists coming in from Korea, Japan, China to work at the studio, as well as people from California and Canada. So it's kind of it's almost like a boutique getaway studio in a resort area, and so that's kind of been a good thing. We've got, ties to people in Japan and LA and Vancouver. So people just fly in and sort of, enjoy like a week.
Yeah. But how has COVID-19 impacted that? Like someone who works with, as much as we do things online, you still have to do a lot of face-to-face interaction with people. And that's obviously been greatly disrupted now.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was chaos for the first few months because we had to just absolutely pack. Our summer was booked up before the new year of 2020, so we had the summer already booked solid, and we had sort of several games and animation and anime lined up for voiceover stuff and several things going on, and then absolutely everything had to be changed to online. All of our workshops, because there were people, we'd fly people in. We were flying in voice actors like Karen Strassman and Richard Epcar and Kira Buckland were coming in, flying in and doing voiceover jobs, and also doing stuff at the studio. All of that kind of went away. So we pivoted and we're still doing some stuff in studio, but very, very limited. We just had, I don't know if you know Dorian Lockett. He's the voice of Lando Calrissian in the new Star Wars. I guess it's Star Wars animation. I'm not sure. He's
probably one of the animated spin-offs.
Yeah. So I think so. Yeah. And so he was in the other day, and we were talking about the situation, how people are still trying to do in-studio stuff, but I mean, a lot of it's been disrupted for sure. I mean, it's sad. We had, for Konami, we had a Tuvan throat singer. I don't know if you know Tuvan, or Mongolian throat singer.
Yeah.
And he actually came into the studio. So he flew down from Portland, came in the studio because we needed him to be in the studio to do it for what he does. So I guess it comes down to what essentially needs to be in the studio. We have people in, but we're doing a lot of stuff online with people. And it works to some degree, but you can't replace that vibe of having somebody there in the room with you. It's just another world, and it's so nice to have people physically there with you. But we work with Japanese companies, and we'll set up, screens for them to zoom in and work with the musicians and the voice actors. So we're doing our best to keep things going, and it is not ideal and it's tough, but I think that we have to get used to a new world, right?
And do you think there's going to be any like long-term consequences, at least for your end of things and how you have to conduct business? Since obviously we're going to be in a similar situation for probably close to another year.
Yeah, I'm sure at least, yeah. I honestly think that for us, it might actually get better. And because when I lived in Japan, when I left Japan, I was doing a ton of session singing for commercials and a lot of writing with lots of people from all different kind of backgrounds, different studios. And they always insisted I come to the studio. So as soon as I said I'm leaving, I'm getting married, I'm leaving, Japan was like, okay, that all just kind of stopped. But now it's coming back because they're going like, well, maybe it's okay. We don't need to have Raj there physically, and we can just Zoom in to the studio and do stuff. So in some respects, I think that it opens us up internationally to possibilities. But it hurts. It's going to hurt at first. I mean, change is always painful. And so the initial change is painful, but I think that it'll bring people together internationally more, right? Because people will be more open to doing online projects, which a lot of older people over 40 don't want to do, really. They're like, they find it a little bit scary to do that. But I think that now that there's no choice, we're going to see a lot of international collaborations. Because honestly, the Anime Gives Back project, I was quite surprised that Sunrise and Yoko were okay with that, because they're more traditional and they want people, they want them in the studio. They wanted you to be in the studio where they can guide you and micromanage you, right? That's kind of the style. So that just proved to me that, hey, we can do this online and we can be really productive, right? And do great things, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the Japanese side of the business specifically, because they seem to, at least from what I've seen, they seem to be having a really difficult time with all of this, because every part of the Japanese work culture is so incredibly emphasized or incredibly focused on actually employers and those who oversee, or employees and those who oversee them, being in the same room, and that seems to go even in the creative industries as well. Have you found that the Japanese companies or individuals that you collaborate with, have they had a hard time adapting, or do the companies tend to be difficult to work with in those circumstances?
I mean, I think that they're starting to adapt to it. Mm-hmm. They've been, like I said, when I left in 2010, and it was absolutely, they were just like, at that time I was just like, hey, we can still do this online. We don't have to. It doesn't have to be the end, but they were very, adamant about it. It's like, no. You have to be here in the studio. We need to have you physically here. And they would fly me back to Tokyo just to do a singing job for 3 or 4 hours. And I was like, you don't need to do that. I can do it here and send you the data. There's no problem. So, in Japan, the culture is very slow to make changes. They slowly make changes. They can, once they adapt. But I mean, they're traditionally, they're very traditional, and traditionally they move slowly to make changes. The record labels had a hard time. They still don't like streaming. They didn't like downloading. They still sell CDs,
It's like Japan is still one of the most prominent markets in the world for physical media.
I know, it's insane. I mean, it's one of those things where they don't want to change, but they're at the cutting edge of technology. It's like a complete contradiction, and it's just like, wow, it's like, okay, you're the cutting edge of technology, but you still want to sell CDs, right?
Yeah, but I mean, they have like Tatsuya rental stores in Japan too, but they've got sections in those CD rental areas that are like, you cannot find these artists on streaming platforms at all anywhere. And I can't argue with that. You can't argue with that.
I mean, it's like, if you're like a music connoisseur, which I'm sure you are, and I am too. I think it hurts the artist, but it's also kind of cool, right? If you're not from their point of view, they want to protect the artist and they want to sell the product, right? It's the product is the CD to them, because they haven't really gotten over the age of CDs when you made like unbelievable money from selling CDs that cost you like 50 cents to make. You'd sell them for $20.
Outrageous.
Yeah. I mean, us as consumers, we go like, well, what? But them, because why aren't you on like Spotify or Pandora so we can go just listen to you, or YouTube? So they, in some ways, they've hijacked, the artist's ability to really become international. But they've developed this protectionist kind of society where they've keeping everything internalized. So you got to buy it, as a CD to get it. And you may have a smaller audience, but that audience is paying for the product.
Yeah. And that's, I've heard many arguments that that's what's holding the Japanese music industry back internationally compared to the Korean music industry, which is much more open about actually sharing content and making it accessible outside of, the home country, whereas the Japanese industry is so scared to break away from the reliable domestic market that, has always worked for them, and they know probably always will work for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, that's what I mean about moving slowly and not wanting to make change. It's like, there is a way to even eat your food in Japan, and there's a way to drink your tea, and you don't mess with it, right? And because it throws everybody for a loop if you do things wrong. I remember when I first moved to Japan, this is back in the 90s, early 90s, I went into a Denny's there, and I was studying Japanese, and I went to the Denny's, and at the time I was a vegetarian, right? So I said, okay, I just don't want the sausages with the pancakes, right? And it was like the waitress just went, what? And then she was so confused, and I said it, and I had Japanese friends with me who said I said it correctly, and then they said it to her, and she was so confused, she went back to the back, and she came back with the manager. And then the manager said, so why don't you want the sausages? And I said, well, I don't want the sausages. I just want the pancakes and the eggs, and I don't need the sausages because don't eat sausages right now, and I'm not eating meat. And then he was so confused, he went and got the chef, and the chef came out, and the chef said, was there something wrong with this? Is something wrong with our sausages? And they couldn't figure it out. I said, no, I just don't want it that way. And that just kind of really sums up the way people think. It's just, there is the way,
That's not the first time I've heard a story like that either. Something else I wanted to bring up, you hear a lot now, looking at streaming services like Spotify, about how artists are currently make so little money off of it. They make, less than a penny per play.
Right.
And it's impossible for many artists to really make anything even close to a living, or to make a lot of money, let alone a living off of streaming music. Like, what's your take on the whole streaming issue?
Well, I mean, the streaming issue is right now in the courts, and there's going to be some changes pretty soon. In the next couple of years, we're going to see some changes on that. Right now, it's really, you're correct. It's very difficult to make a living off of streaming. I was in the age of when we were selling CDs, and we would sell, selling 50,000, 100,000 CDs wasn't a big deal. And so artists would make real money, and you would make a real living. So when streaming came about, and YouTube and everything like that, to me it was upsetting, because I was like, okay, you're going from making a great living to making pennies on the dollar. And is it unfair? Absolutely. It's absolutely unfair. Is something going to change? Yes, it's going to change. Is there a way to make a living from it? Still, yes, there is. But it's different now. You have to learn to self-manage your career, because unless you're a big artist, there's no cut left for a manager or anybody else, or a label. So one really good piece of information is to go to a lady named Zoe Keating, Zoe and then Keating. She's a Canadian artist, amazing cellist who does her own shows, and she actually publishes what she makes, so that you can see how much she makes off of album sales, off of her streaming, and she's a successful woman. She makes a living off of it. And she's somebody that I know, and she's Canadian like us, but she lives in California like me. And so she has she's learned to manage her career on a do-it-yourself platform, which I always encourage artists to do. I do that now. I no longer have anybody managing me. I no longer have I have labels I work with, but I do a lot of it myself with my own studio, and so I can make a living. And a good living, as long as I'm careful and I manage it properly. So Zoe Keating is a really good template for people to look at and go like, hey, that's what you can expect. And then if that's what you can expect, at least you are not, flying blind, and you can sort of go like, okay, I'm not going to make money on streaming. I'm not going to make a lot on album sales, but I can make money selling merchandise, and I can make money touring. And I should be investing my money instead into self-promotion, right? And not into trying to get a deal or a manager.
Yeah.
Right? So if you look at her online information she publishes, I think that's just an amazing resource, because it lays it all out there for artists. Go, here it is. Here's a woman. She makes her $100,000 a year or $120,000 a year, but this is how she does it. And there's no you're not being blindsided by lack of information. She just puts it right on the table for you. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're moving away. Well, we have moved away over the last 20 years from a one-size-fits-all kind of approach to how you make money from music. And
right.
I don't know. Do you think this has created more opportunity for more people, or do you think that this whole obstacle of having to find your own way of making a living and being able to live has made it harder overall? Or maybe we shouldn't totalize that much.
Well, I mean, it's a really good question, and I hear that all the time from my interns at the studio and people that I work with, and I think that in my mind, this has created a more of a level playing field, so that everybody, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, and you're an independent person who can do it yourself, it's never been a better time to actually do things, because it's all fragmenting into smaller pieces. So that means the industry is smaller pieces, which means everybody gets a piece of that pie if you want it. And so, but you have to do it yourself. You can't sit around waiting for someone else to do it for you. And smart people, smart artists, just go out there and go like, listen, I'm going to capture this piece of the pie. When you think about it, if you have 100 fans, just do it this way. You have, so let's say 1,000 fans that pay you $100 a year. How much money do you have?
Sorry.
100,000.
Okay, yeah, 100,000. Sorry, I wasn't prepared to do even simple math. But
no problem. So you got 1,000 fans, which is not a lot of people, and each one of them spends $100 a year. That's not much to come see a show, to buy maybe $5 or $10 for an album, to buy some merch, and support you with maybe a contribution on Patreon or something, whatever. So you've got 1,000 people to pay you $100 each. That's it. You have $100,000 US in your pocket. That's it. And that's a good starting point. I keep telling people in the industry, if you just break it down by the numbers, I mean, you have more chance than ever before in history to get those 1,000 people and to ask them for $100. Now, let's say you had 20,000 of them, right? Then you just do the numbers on it exponentially. You could grow. I have some friends who, have great fan bases. I mean, they can look at Zoe's, breakdown, and you can see that, she's not rich, but she makes a good living off of that because she understands how those 3,000 fans work for her, right? Mm-hmm. How much they're willing to support her. And then, she's got a great formula, and it works for her really well. And she's just one of like thousands of people out there doing that. So in other words, I just think that now is a good time. And so you can just nickel and dime it and make your living, as opposed to 100 artists making all of the money and nobody making anything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's a strategy. And I think just like anything else, and people want to put their time and effort into the strategy. The good thing about music is you have an actual product to sell. You're not trying to do affiliated sales or anything like that. You have a product. And a lot of people, surprisingly, they don't mind giving you $5 or $10 to get your album. If you just ask them, just say, listen, support me, give me $10. And like I said, if you got 30,000 of them, holy cow, you've made some serious money, and I have a few friends who've done that actually quite well. And I know a lot of them who do that regularly and make a surprising living off of just doing things. I have friends on Patreon who are making a living off of Patreon, which is kind of hard to do, but it's doable, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of this has been about how consumers have changed their approach to or their attitudes towards music, especially after over 20 years of piracy running rampant, which, has led to some positive change on the industry side. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Personally, I prefer to actually own my albums. I am very reluctantly trying to look into getting into these streaming services, and I hear so much about people refusing to, support Spotify because they pay so little to artists, or the various problems with Apple Music, or how YouTube Music's just a gigantic gong show right now because they have rights for so many artists split between the old Google Music, which they're abandoning, and it's going to be like that for years. It's so frustrating to wrap my head around. But there's also the other aspect of this is that those streaming platforms, that's how people find music now. That's where you go to find music to start with, let alone support artists that you like. Like these streaming platforms, they're kind of like radio combined with ownership, which it's probably better than radio in some ways for in terms of finding music that you want to find. But then of course, on the other hand, the music can be taken away at any point on a streaming platform, so it's not as good as owning. But your options for ownership are dwindling, even with vinyl records being a thing. Like not everyone can put out a vinyl record, of course, and not depending on where you live, you're not always going to have great options for buying that stuff. You got to import it a lot of the time. That's kind of where I'm sitting right now and all that. Yeah.
Well, have you checked out a website called Indiepreneur?
No.
Okay. It's an interesting website. It's about music marketing, and they've got some amazing ideas on there. I like it. So check out Indiepreneur. And it really, I think it's really helpful for the independent musician a lot of people don't know about all the different things that they can access, especially if you're a Canadian musician. That's a whole other conversation. Yeah. But there's Specter, and there's all sorts of other grant programs that are available on Canada Council, different things for artists in Canada. We have a huge advantage over other artists. Canada's got a better music ecosystem than the U.S., to be honest with you. There's just more possibility to build a sustainable fan base in Canada than there is in the U.S. and to get on tour and to utilize all the programs out there that will fund you.
Yeah, I've always argued that for all the problems we see with the production of like television and movies and things like that in Canada, we got the music situation here is very good. The support and the variety and the art and just the number of artists that have been able to get a start in Canada and have a prosperous career. It's been really good.
Oh my God, Canada's amazing, Jesse. I'm telling you, man. That's why I'm really pro-Canadian. Even though I live in the U.S., I'm pro-Canadian. I support Canadian artists. I buy Canadian content, just because I think that for a country of 36 million of us now, we produce. We're next door to a giant, and we're producing on par, awesome content on a regular basis. Like it's just amazing. I look at I always watch TV shows and movies, and I look at the ending credits, and I go like, where is this produced? And I go, oh my God, it's produced in Canada, right? And I just go like, what? This is incredible. I mean, some of the best composers out there, best bands, songwriters, actors. It's just like Canada is like really, really amazing. It's just, we're just a really well kept secret, you know?
Yeah, actually that leads me to another question. As someone who goes back and forth, between, a few countries, but mostly the US and Canada, what has been your experience with accessing not just music, but any media within Canada?
In what sense? Like,
you hear much of people complaining that we can't access certain content in Canada because we don't get Hulu, we don't get HBO Max, stuff like that. I mean, as someone who goes back and forth between the U.S. and Canada, and someone who works in media. Like, do you have any thoughts on that or any experiences with that? You don't seem to have too many issues with getting what you want.
No, I mean, I have tons of streaming services at home in the studio, and I tend to think that in the U.S. it's just like everything's thrown up against the wall and let's see what sticks. But in Canada it seems to be that we have limited choices, but that's actually good because then you don't have this sort of it's like going to a buffet and you've got so much food you can't appreciate any of those dishes.
You're just paralyzed by choice.
Yeah, you're paralyzed by choice. Exactly. That's a good way of putting it. I mean, in Canada, I go like, hey, this is really cool. I was on Air Canada the other day and I watched this TV show called, HBO show called Avenue 5, which I've never seen before. It's a sci-fi comedy and it was unbelievably hilarious and produced by Will Smith. And I look, it's all made in Toronto. Right. And I'm like, okay, I would never have seen that in America. There's no way I would have gotten there. But because in Canada, we kind of, everyone here is focused on a certain kind of media and content. that, it's getting exposure. And that's kind of, we should be almost protecting that. Otherwise, it just becomes a big smorgasbord of all sorts of things. You go like, I don't know if that's good or not. I'm going to try that. And you can't possibly taste everything, right? It's just too many things on the table. And that makes for you going like, it dilutes you. And so I go in any given night in the Bay Area, I go like, well, what's out there for music? And I go, oh my God, there's like 600 choices. And I know that 599 of them are going to, be mediocre. I'm going to find one nugget. But instead, I think in Canada, we have quality, that's limited, like a limited menu. And that actually gives you a chance for the quality to shine, right? And a lot of Canadian created content. I mean, I go to the clubs here when before this, I was going to clubs when I get back and I was like, the bands are amazing. It's amazing. I go like, wow, I'm just hearing local bands in Canada that are amazing, and then I look at the charts in the US and look at how many artists are successful, and there's a lot of Canadian artists on the charts.
And, yeah. And much is being said over the last few years, just in terms of all the media regulation stuff in Canada about the discoverability of Canadian content. Based on everything you're saying, I get the impression you don't feel there's any issue with that the ability to discover Canadian artists or Canadian media is not in any real danger here.
I don't think so at the moment. I think that there's definitely like, we have the advantage, but we have to we have to kind of be careful with that too, because if you want to just throw everything up against the fridge, as it were, and see what sticks, it becomes dangerous. Then you're competing with so many other people who have bad content but a lot of money to push it. And I don't think that that's where we need to go. I think we need to really focus in on like preserving our culture here and developing the artists we have here. And I think that generates great content. In the US, it's like, okay, you have huge amount of competition for one piece of pot of money. And that's not good, because, you just have an overwhelming amount of people trying to get one thing. I mean, how can that be good? Right? And then it's like it's feast or famine, right? And then you don't nurture anybody. You just get a whole bunch of people going like, I'm going to get that. And then it's like American, it becomes like American Idol, right? It's do or die. And I don't think American Idol creates great artists. I think American Idol creates a cash flow for the American Idol producers, but it doesn't create great artists. We'll never find another Bob Dylan from American Idol. We won't, right? You're never going to find the Tragically Hip from American Idol.
No.
You're never going to get that. All you're going to get is an industry that's making tons of money off of these poor people who are just struggling to be heard. That's kind of how I see that down the U.S. industry right now. It's just it's not fair. The fairness is gone, but that's my opinion. Mm-hmm.
Well, let me flip, that subject over a little bit. Whether you're in Canada or the U.S., what's your experience accessing Japanese media on this side, whether it's music or TV or movies or anime or whatever?
I mean, I get enough so that I'm happy, and I go back to Japan regularly, so I'm probably not the best person to ask about that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
You can stock up on all those CDs when you're
I can just
those $40 CD singles.
Oh my God. Yeah. I know, that's insane. Yeah. No, I'm not the best person to ask about that, because I'm spoiled. I can just call people and have them send me stuff anytime I want it. And people give me stuff. They send me CDs and DVDs from Japan still to the studio. So yeah, I can't be objective about that one.
And I mean, what are you into these days? What music are you listening to?
I'm listening to a lot of stuff these days. I'm just, I'm really, surprisingly, I wasn't into Spotify before, but I'm just checking out so much a variety of music on Spotify these days. And I'm just really going through all sorts of different things and different genres. I'm trying to just really explore at this point. I can't say what I like. I just like a lot of different things. And I'm exploring, now that, because with this whole lockdown, I've just been able to you know what? I'm just going to listen to 90s electronica, right? And I'll just do that for a couple of days, and then I'll listen to, 80s rock, the next day. So I'm going like, okay, I might as well just enjoy the fact that we can get all this, on your phone.
Yeah, and going back to, I guess the question that many people would start the interview with, like what were your influences? Was there any particular type of music you listened to most growing up, or would you say you had a pretty eclectic taste?
Yeah, pretty eclectic taste, but I grew up with rock. I mean, I just grew up in Canada with rock. It was bluesy rock. For sure. That's what I grew up with. Like, I'd be listening to, alternative rock in the 80s and the 90s, and that's what I grew up with, and that's what I know, and classic rock too. And surprisingly enough, a lot of other composers and artists in Japan, that's what they grew up to, I listen to them and I talk to them and I go, wow, and we have a lot in common. It's rock really is a foundation for a lot of people, of my generation at least, and a lot of people in the anime world. I'm surprised how many people are big rock fans, but and jazz, of course, right? Yeah. So there's a little bit of both of that going on.
Last time I had you on the show, you were talking a little bit about how, back when you were in Japan full time or most of the time, a lot of your work was based in the most important part of the Japanese entertainment industry, which is of course advertising.
Yeah.
Japanese commercials. And I was just curious. I know you haven't really worked in that area since about 2010.
Yeah.
From my understanding, but have you kind of kept up with just that part of the business, or people who are working in there? 'Cause I'm really interested in how COVID-19 has impacted that area, because I follow those Japanese commercial compilations you find on YouTube, and I've noticed more of them are. How there are certain serialized ones that you see the same characters popping up all the time. I noticed a lot of them are going into like, clip show mode, showing scenes from their older ads.
Right. I still get occasional commercials from Japan, not a ton of them, but occasionally I get a commercial here and there, and I do some TV commercials here. I don't know really what's going on with them. That was a big thing for me, and now it's not. So I don't know what's happening with them. I'd love to reconnect with them. I mean, I know that it's big business still in Japan, but it's not what it used to be. It used to be like an incredibly huge business. So, but I think it's still in play. It's still happening. I just can't comment on that, effectively right now.
They still have Tommy Lee Jones in Boss ads.
He's always there. His face is like melting off of his skull. It's just like it's going to fall right off. They get him in the worst possible, I don't know, like camera positions or something. He looks awful in those commercials. It's crazy.
I mean, that's pretty much all he does these days, I think, too.
Well, oh man, they pay him like millions of dollars to do those things. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
They have unlimited money. There's no end to their money there with that. It's crazy.
Yeah, I was in Japan back around Halloween of last year, and I got to say I am so happy that I made it there before this whole pandemic thing happened. And yeah, we watched quite a bit of TV, and Japanese TV. I think I am able to appreciate. You hear people complain about Japanese TV all the time. I think I appreciate it a little more than a lot of people do. But yeah, the ads are always the best part.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the TV is brutal, but you're right. The ads are fun. I mean, I did so many ads. I think I mentioned I got like close to 250 ads, 300 ads in Japan over the years, and it was like crazy. It was just so many of them, just on a regular basis, and it's like I enjoyed the ads, and I couldn't sit through most of the TV shows, but the ads were always lots of fun. They're entertaining.
So, and I know that when you work in anime, you typically don't have, or when you work in anime or games, you typically don't have time to really engage with anything that you're not working on. But in the area of anime or games, is there anything that you've watched or played recently in what spare time you have that you found notable?
No, honestly, I'm just always working. I wish I had more time to actually play and enjoy things. I'm just working all the time. Yeah, no, sorry, I don't have anything right now for you on that one. In the next few weeks I will. I'm in quarantine.
All right, Raj, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrapped up?
That's great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
No problem. Where can people find you online or on social media?
Yeah, you can go to you can join me on Instagram, Raj Ramayya, Instagram, or Facebook if you're still on Facebook, or you can just go to strawberryhillmusic.com and you can check out what we do there. So that's it. Really, Instagram, Facebook is where I'm usually living most of the time. Hope to see you there.
And thanks a lot for coming on. Thanks to you for tuning in to Zonan Canada. You can reach me on Twitter @jbetteridge or email zonancanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultraclystron, and you can find that on his album Packet Flood, which is available at ultraclystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever you use. I also have a Ko-fi account, ko-fi.com/ZonanCanada. You can leave me a tip if you like what I do. For the next little while, any money that I get through my Ko-fi account is going to be donated to local charities such as the Hogan's Alley Society or Black Lives Matter Canada or Vancouver. And yeah, thanks for listening. See you again.